Hello, boys and girls, and welcome to Grandma Teresa's Story Time. Today I'm reading from Winnie the Pooh's Stories for Christmas, Bruce Talkington, illustrated by John Kurtz. The story, Snow Time Like Christmas. But Mama, moaned a distressed Roo, how can it be Christmas Eve when there's no snow? It is strange, sighed Kanga. I've never known the 100-acre wood to have snow by Christmas. Kanga and little Roo were looking forlornly out of their open front door at the barren forest. The leaves had all departed long ago, and the carpets of grass had exchanged their crisp green color for somber browns, like children trading their colorful play clothes for warm pajamas to wear through the long winter's sleep. You think the snow will ever come, Mama? Roo asked anxiously. It just doesn't seem like Christmas at all. I don't know, Roo dear, answered Kanga with a shrug. Snow, like all weather, has a mind of its own. Then Kanga smiled down at the woeful expression on her son's face. Don't worry, Roo, she told him with a reassuring pat on the head. Just because the snow is silly enough to miss Christmas doesn't mean we have to. Yeah, agreed Roo with a laugh. And if it's really the night before Christmas, I have some presents to deliver. Whatever do you mean? The surprised Kanga wanted to know. Well, you see, began Roo, hopping nervously from one foot to the other as he tried to explain. I thought it wasn't going to be Christmas till it snowed, and that I had plenty of time, so I haven't delivered any of the presents I've gotten for our friends. See? Kanga shook her head in exasperated amusement. Oh dear, she sighed. It's a good thing you didn't wait any longer. I suppose I'll have to. Can I deliver them now, Mama? Interrupted Roo excitedly. Kanga glanced outside, and her brows knitted together into a mother's worried expression. It's going to be dark very soon, she began slowly. Roo, jumping up and down in his excitement, couldn't wait for her to finish. I won't get lost, Mama, he protested. I just have to deliver my presents on time. I don't want anyone to think I forgot them on Christmas. All right, Roo, answered Kanga with a smile. Then she held up a warning finger. But promise to stay on the path and come straight home when you're finished. Okay, Mama, piped Roo happily in response. I promise. Just a very few minutes later, Roo was hopping rapidly down the path with a sack full of presents for his friends slung over his shoulder. Then something cold and wet burst on the tip of Roo's small, pointed nose. Before his startled gaze drifted another snowflake with, as is the case of most snowflakes, a great many more right behind it. Hooray! Squeaked the delighted Roo. You made it in time for Christmas, and I'm very glad to see you. He grinned and lifted his face to the falling snow. And I'm sure everyone else will be too. He laughed and poked out his tongue to catch the falling frozen drops of snowflakes. And at that very moment, the other inhabitants of the 100-acre wood were indeed delighting in the descending snow, which grew more and more frenzied, as if all the snowflakes wanted to be on hand for the arrival of Christmas morning. Winnie the Pooh stuck his head out of a window and chuckled as the thickly falling snowflakes seemed to vie with one another for the excitement of plunging down the neck of the bear's red jersey and tickling him into laughter. From an upper-story window of Rabbit's house, old Long-Ears greeted the faster and faster falling snow with a sniff of satisfaction. It was about time the garden got its annual blanket of white, he thought to himself. The only time it looked prettier was when it was sprouting the greens and reds and yellows and oranges of brightly colored vegetables. Gopher's head emerged cautiously from the mouth of one of his numerous burrows and was instantly covered with a fine dusting of white snow, like frosting on a donut. He whistled, impressed by the amount of snow that was now tumbling from the sky. He smiled. A layer of snow on the ground always made his winter sleep all the cozier. Gopher yawned in relaxed anticipation of the long nap to come. Piglet was fiercely sweeping his walk, but the white curtain of winter was now descending much too quickly. As soon as he cleared one section of his front walk, another was buried in snow. With an exasperated sigh, Piglet leaned wearily on his broom and watched the snow gather in sparkling piles of white all over his walkway. Well, the very small animal told himself with a smile, at least it's very clean snow. It would be a pity if I had to wash it and pile it up myself. He giggled into his hand at such an idea and continued to observe the soft accumulation of white powder. And Tigger was no sooner aware of the cascading snowflakes than he was out making snow tigers in the ice-cold fluff. 'Cause that's what tigers do best when it's snowy, flying, he laughed, then added a whoo 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 for good measure. Meanwhile, Eeyore watched the swirling, twirling, and wildly somersaulting snowflakes with a rueful smile. Well, he rumbled to himself, at least the holes in my roof will have something to let inside the house. That'll make 'em happy. And then the donkey smiled because there was no one around to see it, and because he was so fond of snow that he truly didn't mind it sharing his house with him. Then quite suddenly, on every face all over the 100-acre wood, from Pooh Bear to Eeyore, a realization popped open their eyes and mouths in amazement as they all thought the same thought at once. "Oh my goodness," gasped Pooh. "It's snowing," began Rabbit in thoughtful surprise. "And that means," whistled a flabbergasted Gopher to himself, "that it's almost Christmas," finished the suddenly very nervous Piglet. "And Christmas means," gasped Tigger, rubbing his head in wonder, "that there are presents to be delivered," said Eeyore, "and not much time to deliver 'em in." It wasn't very long at all before everyone was crisscrossing through the 100-acre wood, loaded down with presents that they left at one another's homes. By the time everything had been delivered, however, the snowstorm had turned into a blizzard, a whirling waterfall of white, falling so thickly and blowing so fiercely that it was impossible to tell whether there was a path underfoot or a tree in front of a nose. As a result, there were quite a number of misplaced paths, bumped trees, and bruised noses by the time all the presents had been properly placed. In fact, the only one who wasn't having any trouble finding his way home in the blowing snow and falling darkness was little Roo. But then that wasn't so very unusual. Home was where his mama waited for him, and nothing as minor as a howling blizzard can keep a child away from his mother. But as he hopped along, each bounce jarring off the snow to try to cling to him, Roo came across a strange sight. There was a snowman standing in the middle of what used to be the path before it was covered with snow, pondering in a very Pooh Bear sort of way. "Hello," said Roo in surprise, shouting to be heard over the roar of the storm. "Why, hello, Roo," the snowman shouted back, which surprised Roo even more because he could not recall ever hearing a snowman talk before, let alone call him by name. And he spoke in a voice that sounded very much like Pooh's. But that must be the storm playing tricks, Roo decided. Why else would a snowman sound like Winnie the Pooh? "I seem," shouted the snowman, "to be having a bit of bother finding my way home in the storm." "Why don't you come home with me?" suggested Roo at the top of his voice. "What a good idea," responded the snowman agreeably. "I suppose any home is a good home in the middle of a storm." So Roo continued to hop toward home with the snowman stomping along behind on his short, stubby legs. But the evening surprises were not over for Roo. Another snowman appeared out of the gloom, with long attachments on his head, like feelers on a caterpillar. At Rue's invitation to join them, the second snowman, who was shivering so badly that he couldn't speak, nodded in happy acceptance. Rue found this very strange. Who ever heard of a snowman who got too cold? He asked himself. It must have something to do with Christmas Eve, Rue concluded. He was certain the magic of the holiday had to have something to do with these walking, talking, too cold snow creatures. The next snow being they came across had 4 legs and 2 heads. The second head appeared to be a very small animal with large pink ears sitting atop the first droopy-eared creature. Wow, thought the amazed Rue. Whoever made that snowman certainly had a lot of imagination. The last snow person who joined the procession to Rue's house carried another little snow creature in his arms that whistled when he talked. The voice sounded familiar, but Rue was getting tired and wanted to get home, so he didn't try very hard to figure out who he was reminded of. And the snowman, holding the whistler, had a tail he kept sitting back on and was trying to hop like Rue. Rue was pleased to think that snowmen hopped too, but this one wasn't very successful at hopping because of the snowman he was carrying in his arms. When at last Rue saw the lights of his house shining brightly through the snow, he dashed ahead and flung open the door. "Mama!" he shouted. "I'm home, just like I promised." Kanga ran out to meet him. "Good for you, dear," she smiled. Then she began brushing snow from her son. "You look almost like a snowman," she laughed. "I brought home some company," Rue explained, excitedly pointing to the snow creatures on the porch. "See?" "How nice," responded Kanga. Much to her son's surprise, she was not at all surprised by the sight of Rue's guests. "I'll take care of our visitors," Kanga told Rue as she pushed him toward his bedroom, "while you get out of those wet clothes and put on some warm pajamas." Rue was very anxious to ask the snow creatures about Christmas and magic and the best snow for snowballs, so he changed in no time at all. But when he ran back into the parlor, the snowmen were gone. Sitting next to the fire with pools of water puddling at their feet were his friends, Pooh, Rabbit, Piglet, Eeyore, Gopher, and Tigger, sipping mugs of hot chocolate in front of a cozy fire and Kanga's hearth. "Where?" Rue sputtered, looking around in disappointment. "Were all the snowmen?" "What snowmen, Rue dear?" asked Kanga with a quizzical look on her face. "The ones who follow me home," he wailed. "The magic ones that could walk and talk and shiver because it was Christmas Eve." "Oh," responded Rabbit, exchanging knowing looks with the others. "Those snowmen." It was much too warm for them in here," blurted out Piglet nervously. "Yeah," Tigger agreed. "They had to go back outside in the cold coolness." "After all," Gopher whistled, "they have a lot to do and only one night a year to do it in." "They were sorry they couldn't say goodbye," rumbled Eeyore. "Oh, bother," sighed Pooh sadly. "I'm sorry I missed them too." "Oh, well," said Rue in a very disappointed voice. "At least I got to meet them." "And there's always next year, Rue," sympathized Pooh, putting his arm around Rue's shoulders. "Perhaps I'll get to meet them then, too." Kanga patted her son's head. "I'm certain they were glad to have met you, Rue dear." "No doubt about that," sniffed Rabbit, "and just in the nick of time." "And they won't forget you, kid," announced Tigger. "They won't?" said Rue, brightening. "Are you sure?" "As sure as my name is T-I-double-ger-er." So that night, after the snow had ceased falling and he said good night to everyone, Rue went to bed. He was very happy and dreamed good dreams about his new friends and hoped they had a wonderful Christmas Eve, doing whatever it was snowmen did on Christmas Eve. But most of all, he hoped he'd meet them again sometime. And when Roo awoke Christmas morning, he not only discovered presents under his tree, but also found a yard full of snowmen out the front door. Around them were the familiar footprints of his friends, circling, crossing, intersecting. Roo knew that there was no better place to spend Christmas than at his house, and the snowmen, after a magical Christmas Eve, obviously knew it too. And that even if he never saw the walking and talking and shivering snowmen again, he'd never forget them. And after all, aren't good memories and magic what Christmas is all about? That was a wonderful way to spend a night before Christmas, sighed Pooh in contentment as he and Christopher Robin walked homeward through the snow. Everyone else had said goodnight and gone home to bed and to wait excitedly for Christmas morning. I like song singing, the bear continued happily, especially when the words at the end of the lines all end with the same sound. That does make it pleasant, agreed Christopher Robin with a smile. But I do have one question, Christopher Robin, frowned Pooh, glancing up at his friend. And what is that, Pooh Bear? Do I invite her to breakfast? Pooh answered. Or is she going to invite me? Christopher Robin, knowing the answer, tried not to laugh impolitely when he asked, Whom do you mean, Pooh? Why, Christmas Carol, of course, chuckled Pooh. I'd very much like to meet her. Perhaps it will work out that you will someday, Pooh, responded Christopher Robin, placing his hand tenderly on his best friend's head. Good, breathed Pooh happily. Merry Christmas, Christopher Robin. Merry Christmas, silly old bear. I hope you enjoyed that story, boys and girls. As you can see, it's almost Christmas. But before then, always remember this. The more we get together, the more we get together, the happier we'll be. For your friends are my friends, and my friends are your friends. More we get together, the happier we'll be. And until next time, stay safe. Bye.